Well, hey everyone, welcome back to another session with my good friend Nathan. Hey Nathan.
Hello, hello.
My name is Scott, and Nathan and I work together here at Christ Community Church on the adult ministries team. Nathan does missions, we do Celebrate Recovery, and we've created this podcast because we recognize that not everybody's comfortable coming to a recovery meeting right away. So I want to encourage you to take that first step. We have a meeting here every Monday night at 7 o'clock. Celebrate Recovery. There are some 35,000, believe it or not, Celebrate Recovery meetings around the world. But we are also doing an upcoming recovery concert on Sunday night, June 6th at 6:30 nearby at East Goshen Park. And we're really excited because we are reaching out to other kinds of recovery ministry, inviting those leaders and the folks that attend their meetings to come to the concert, because we want to honor those leaders for the good work that they do. So I will say, you can help us. If you know of a recovery leader, send them to CARE, send them to our webpage. You can just go to care.visitccc.com and you'll see the link for the recovery concert. And have them send me an email at care@visitccc.com, and I will personally invite them. But we'd love to get the word out about this recovery concert. We're simply trying to raise awareness of recovery efforts in Chester County and in Delaware, in both counties. That's all this is about. And you'll get to hear Nathan. He'll be singing, and love his voice. And we have a great band. Actually, our lead pastor's in the band. Is that true? Is that rumor true?
We'll be playing probably only one or two of the songs on the harmonica. So.
Oh, awesome. Well, we're glad to have Billy join us. So we have been working through one of the best-selling books of all time called The Purpose-Driven Life, which you're about to see, by Rick Warren. We highly encourage you to pick that up or to listen to it, however you may listen to it, on Audible or Kindle or any other way. I find it very inspiring. I love the concept that God has created us intentionally with certain spiritual gifts, personality traits, life experiences, strengths. He's created us on purpose. And we want to understand as best as we can humanly do so what those purposes are. So with that said, this book is laid out as a devotional, and it's laid out on a daily basis. In our first two sessions on this book, we worked through days 1 through 7. And right now, in this session, we are going to work on days 8, 9, and 10. So Nathan, with that said, anything striking to you about the next 3 days?
Yeah, I think that it's a great start in this, because it's week by week, a different section. And this week is You Were Planned for God's Pleasure. And it even says, Psalm 149:4, a great verse to actually reflect on and let it go deep. It is short. It says, the Lord takes pleasure in his people. And, you might read, you were made for God's pleasure as a sense of, well, you're made for somebody else to enjoy. And even this verse. But at the same time, we often, on a deep level, especially when we went through like Soul of Shame book, people don't think that the Lord takes pleasure in his people. They don't have a view that God is enjoying his creation. They have a view, which, in my opinion, they pretty much ascribe to God their own emotions, which is, well, I have a pretty sad outlook on things. I have a pessimistic view. I don't think things are going well. And so because of that, they'll project that onto God as well. They'll say, well, God must be pretty upset right now. And well, there are things I think that make God, grieved. I do think, he does take pleasure in his creation as well. I think that he has a different outlook than we do. And it's important to remember that. And in fact, in my opinion, that is the biggest reason to also know that we're to give God pleasure, because we really want his perspective. We really want to see the things the way that he sees them and encounter the things the way he encounters them. So if he's taking pleasure, we want to join that narrative. We want to join that communion of fellowship that is enjoyment, that is joy, that is peace. So that is the first thing that stands out to me.
Yep. And then they have some pointed questions at the end of each daily devotional. And one question that strikes me, kind of in the spirit of how Rick writes these questions, would be, what would my life look like and how would I live differently if I truly believed that I was created for God's pleasure?
Mm-hmm.
So with that in mind, looking at day 9, Rick gets into some specifics on how we please God. And he gives the example of Noah, going all the way back to Noah, that Noah was a pleasure to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And he challenges us and reminds us, really, it's not so much of a challenge, but though for some of us it may feel like it, because some of us may not feel like we are planned for God's pleasure, and some of us may feel like it's impossible to please God, even for those who are Christ followers. And so he gets into how we please God and talks about 5 acts of worship. And in short, again, we're hoping you pick up the book or listen to it, but in short, they are: love God supremely, trust God completely, obey God wholeheartedly, praise and thank God as an act of worship, and remember that when we use our abilities, which is really at the heart of this book in many ways, when God smiles when we use our abilities.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do we really believe that? Like Nathan and I, here we are doing this, and of course anybody could do this. I know for you and I, we have a heart to see people take a step forward in their recovery. It drives us. It's exciting. Like if somebody writes us back and says, "Thanks for the time you're spending on that. It actually inspired me to come to your Celebrate Recovery," or it inspired me to go to an AA meeting or an NA meeting or an SA meeting. That would give me such a sense of fulfillment. Do I really believe that God is created me, make it personal, created me for his pleasure? And do I believe it's possible for me to please him on a regular basis?
Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm saying to you. And these are all invitations. God doesn't force us to love him. It's an invitation. But in that invitation, it totally transforms our life. I mean, God smiles when we use our abilities, because he's saying, well, I put these strengths in you. I made you with these abilities. This is how I intended your life to look with these abilities and strengths. And if you live that way, your life transforms, because you're the most happiest in that point too. Not to keep turning it back to say it's only about us, because it is about God's pleasure. But the way that God has done it is it's mutually beneficial too. It's about us too. It's not just you can have one or the other. It's actually on the other side, right? On the other side, which is when we use our abilities, then he's happy, then and we're happy as well. And it seems like we resist some of these invitations because we're just not trusting that that is the case. We think that that we get more joy when we're doing it ourselves, and it just and over again too, even though we see that it doesn't bring any joy. So
Something that I think this may bleed into is sometimes I struggle with the thought, if if I um, if I get too carried away with this concept, God is going to put me in my place. So, for example, if I really feel like, if I have anything that's close to pride, God is really going to put me in my place. Like if I give a message and I feel like, and my
yeah,
thought is, that was great and somebody's going to be touched, and God is going to slap me down. And there is that biblical boundary of selfish pride. On the other hand, that I have to fight against that with this concept that the other side of that is enjoying and celebrating that God has created me on purpose. He enjoys when I use my gifts. And I have to convince myself that there's some safe place in there that God invites me into,
mhm.
that, as I believe it was Eric Little that and Rick Warren mentions Eric Little in his book. When I run, he said, I feel God's pleasure.
Yeah, yeah. As a perfect father, no, I'm just joking. If I were to think in the same reference as God, when I look at my children, I don't want them to be stuck in shame. I don't want them to be stuck in doing it on their own or in their own way, because I can see that, their lack of experience, their lack of learning, their own attempts to do it on their own doesn't take them, to the to the to the greatest place they can live from, which is I see these abilities in you, and I'm trying to, and I'm excited for you. I'm excited by your potential. I'm excited for your future, and I want to lead you into that, because of what I see, and invite you to see it the same way as I do. And I think that's so transformative for our lives, is to get into the place where first it starts with, okay, God does take pleasure in his people. But if we have this constant view that God is just angry all the time, or he just, he's the abusive father, at a moment's notice, he can start throwing things around, then we can see why so many will not be trusting of God in that pleasure that he takes in his people.
Excellent. Really powerful.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick look at day 10, and that is the heart of worship, which Rick Warren suggests the heart of worship is surrendering, and even has the lyrics to, I think it's Matt Redman's song I'm coming back to the heart of worship.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, apparently the storyline is there. Either, I can't remember if Matt or the pastor at Matt's church said, we're not going to have music as a form of worship for a certain amount of time. And then when they decided to re-engage, and by the way, that effort was to prove to everyone that music is not the only way to worship.
Yeah.
And that our lives are acts of worship. But coming out of that time of fasting from music, if you will, Matt Redman wrote the song, I'm coming back to the heart of worship.
Yeah.
So, but he says the heart of worship is surrender, surrendering to God. And he gives it's a very, I would say, strong challenge to us. Do I trust God to do what I sense through the scriptures, through the Spirit, through the people of God? Do I trust that I can do what God is leading me to do? Can I surrender? Do I believe that? Here's this is quite a line. Do I believe that God is not a dictator, but a friend?
Yeah.
And can I surrender to him? And he quotes somebody that I have a lot of respect for, A.W. Tozer, who
Yeah.
said, "We haven't yet come to the end of ourselves." I'm summarizing, I think, the quote. That's why we don't fully trust God. We haven't yet come to the end of ourselves. That's
Mhm.
why we don't fully trust God. And that's really convicting. And what he's saying is, well, I can continue to do it my way. And that's why I don't fully trust God, because I haven't yet become convinced that my way is not the best way.
Yeah. He, and I do like how he kind of points out the fact that, frankly, we all surrender to something. There is something that we submit ourselves to, whether it is a hurt or habit or hang up, or a particular regular activity, like watching TV. We do surrender ourselves to something because it's one, what we're kind of meant to do, but there are benefits to surrender, which is that on one level it's I give up, but when we're surrendering to God, I think it can provide such a great, no, I don't think, I know it provides that relief that so many are looking for when they're thinking, I feel the weight of the world just crushing me, and it's driving me, you know, to anxiety, depression, insanity in different forms. Um,
Yep.
and so it literally is another invitation to say, man, like, I never meant for you as just one individual to carry the weight of the world, or to carry even the weight of running your own life to its fullest capacity.
Mm, very powerful. He also he talks about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, who Jesus knew that the Father could have rescued him, but in Jesus' surrender, which, by the way, we surrender when we obey. Surrendering, he says, is best demonstrated in obedience. So when Jesus said, "Lord, take this cup from me, but not my will be done, but yours," that was the ultimate act of surrender. And it's interesting, in Jesus surrendering his own life, in doing so, he saves, pick a number, millions, billions of people. And so he pulls in some common Celebrate Recovery quotes, which, by the way, is, as I worked through this one, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I mean, Celebrate Recovery, of course, came right out of Saddleback Church, which is Rick Warren's church.
Mm-hmm.
And he reminds us on this point to let go and let God, let go and let God, and we don't have to be in charge.
Yeah. Yeah.
He quotes William Booth, who founded the Salvation Army, who said the greatness of a man's power is in his surrendered life. And then another author, E. Stanley Jones, who said, if you don't surrender to Christ, you surrender to chaos. And I was like, wow, that's powerful. As you were saying, you're going to surrender to something. And if you don't surrender to Christ, you're effectively surrendering to chaos.
I think, and that even connects to, it brings to mind Kurt Thompson books, when he's talking about disintegration. We're surrendering to be disintegrated. And God definitely wants us to be integrated once again, and I think that's what the power of worship does too. And we're going to get into more about worship, but worship has the element to involve every aspect of who we are. Like you said, it's obedience. So there's a physical aspect to it. There is a mental, emotional, and definitely spiritual aspect. And that's how it forms us so powerfully, I think, is reintegrating us to be connected, and then connected to God fully as well.
Yep. So he summarizes day 10 by encouraging us to give it all to God, our past regrets, and then he uses the most common phrase in Celebrate Recovery, Give God your hurts, your habits, and your hangups. And the question to ponder, as they say in this book, is what area of my life am I holding back from God? What area am I not surrendering? And I'm sure we can quickly, all of us can quickly come up with at least one of those that we're not surrendering. And great day. That would be day 10. We hope you will join us again for our next session. We are going to go through days 11 through 14. So as always, thanks for listening. We hope that you might, if you're enjoying this, share it with a friend, like it. We want to help people as best as we can. And in our world, this is one of the best ways to do it. At least one of the best platforms, other than face-to-face, of course.
That's right.
Let's do it. All right. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
See you guys.